So guys, I'm just going to preamble a little bit while we find out where Grosset is. 2019, when it came out 2 years ago, was hailed as one of the lowest yielding harvests in the last few decades. And with that came a certain intensity of flavor. And it was quite interesting when we looked at the 19s a short while ago. The roles had reversed, whereas Polish Hill is traditionally the one that's linear and acidic and forward and kind of nervy at a young stage. And the Springvale is one that's more floral, genteel at a young stage. And then, of course, they evolve like crazy as they age. The roles are reversed with 19, whereas the Springvale is the one that was showing as kind of direct and relatively aggressive. And the Polish was one that was quite withdrawn and backward at a, not backward, but shy at an early stage. It's going to be interesting because if you read the vintage reports, the roles have flipped now. It's the 2020 harvest vintage has gone back to being the classic style, where the Polish is something that's quite forward and demanding, and the Springvale is more of that floral, classic floral attribute that seems to manifest out of the Springvale vineyard. Jess just jumped on, so we can ask him all about that in a second. Hi, Jeff. We don't have sound yet. Looking for Jeff, looking for Jeff. Let me see if I can find him.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you? Give me a second. I just need to prioritize Jeff's
Extremely well, and apologies for the delay there.
No worries.
How are you?
James, very good, thank you. How are things with you? Are you back on the farm or are you in Adelaide? Last time we spoke to you, you were in transit.
No, I'm here, and we have Celador for about 3 months, as you're probably aware. Well,
yeah,
for spring.
Shorter this time.
It's all going wonderfully well. So I've been at the coalface. So
Okay.
and I've got a glass of Riesling, but it's not one of mine, but it's tasting pretty nice.
Well, that's a fantastic thing to ask, and we often ask winemakers, what are you drinking at the moment? So what are you drinking at the moment?
I'm drinking, well, actually, we started with a Frederick Emil 2010 Riesling, of course, from Alsace. And I'd have to say, wonderful producer, regrettably caught, very subtly.
Right. Yeah.
And so we moved on to a Leasingham 2003, which at least is under screw cap from the Clare Valley Riesling. So this is actually quite smart and looking really, tasting really, really good. But it just raises this issue again. You get your expectations up with wine under cork.
I know.
People still love that stuff, which is fine because some people still send faxes and some people still ride horses. But no, in general, that people have moved on.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've poured way too much old wine down the sink and sworn the whole time to ever want to go back to it. Jeff, I was just talking to the guys before you got on. 2019 was hailed when it was first released as the driest vintage in many decades. Relatively low crop and very, very intense flavors. Then 2020 comes along and production falls off a cliff. Was it for the same reasons as 19? In other words, lack of rain, or was it something different that caused this very low production in 20?
Yes, it was. To us, it was lack of rain. And in fact, because we can monitor the profile at 90 centimeters and 60 and 30, we can confirm that, since we've had that technology, it's the driest year we've ever seen. And so I believe it was the lowest yield year that I've ever seen in 40 years. Now we have more vineyards now than years ago, but the crop per vine was the lowest we've ever seen. We had some slightly dodgy weather around fruit set and flowering, which accentuated, but essentially to me, it was a lack of rain, a lack of water, as simple as that.
And no upturn for 21 that you can see. Similar kind of conditions.
I think looking ahead in the current climate is quite a scary. I mean, for other reasons. At the moment, it's better, but I should share, and I feel fine about this. It just shows. Years ago, I would never have said this, but now I would say to everyone who's on the call without guilt or concern that we actually irrigated 2 weeks ago, and so we did that to ensure that the vines were happy, basically, as at bud burst. We've never done this before, and really it shows that it's not a lot of water, but in the past we felt that was should be unnecessary, inappropriate. And we did so, and we've had a bit of rain today, and we think that we should be fine, and hopefully we'll be okay until towards Christmas. But it shows that this is uncharted waters for us, and we think that this is prudent and appropriate to make outstanding wine. I would never have dreamt of that when I came here.
Interesting times we're living in, for sure.
Yeah.
I've asked the guys to pour the Springvale 19 and 20 side by side so that we can maybe just, and we had a little run at it just as we were starting, and it's so interesting because just remembering our discussions about a month ago on 19, it seemed like the phenolics and the construct of the Rieslings were reversed. The roles were reversed. The Polish was quite exuberant at an early stage, and the Springvale was quite quiet. But it very clearly on the nose now, you're back to a classic style in 20. So certainly for the Springvale. The Springvale is just gorgeous and unctuous and giving all those florals that I always sort of remember as the trademark for Springvale. Would you agree with that?
I think so, yes. I mean, there have been a few comments about Springvale being even more generous, certainly more generous than in 19, which was, and I guess keeping in mind that our aim with Springvale was to achieve more openness and generosity early. The assumption has always been that wine from Watervale, being a soft rock site with lovely, healthy, green, medium-sized berries, would produce wine that is more open. And I found from that vineyard, and maybe in part because of the clone mix, because it has quite a lot of an unusual clone, that we found that it is on release showing most of its potential, but telling you that maybe you should keep it just for a little while. So I think 20 is showing that lemon lime, in particular lime character that's very pronounced, and a lovely generosity. And I think at the moment I feel comfortable that people would drink it now and enjoy it, and they wouldn't be missing out on too much with the 20.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I was picking up traces of Petro on the 19, which has dissipated quite a lot after the first sort of 15 minutes or so, maybe even less. It's still slightly there, but not as overt as it was when I first opened it. And that's interesting because that's not something I saw in it a month ago or 6 weeks ago. Obviously something that's evolved more recently.
I should have had one open here. So there, you've caught me. I'd be interested if others, just quickly looking through the people who are on the call here.
Jacob, would you agree? Jacob?
Yes. When I first opened them, I got it on both the Springvale and the Polish. 2019, I got a lot of minerality, leaning towards petrol notes, which I thought was a little bit surprising for this age.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. So I'm a bit caught. I should have tasted them, but I don't expect to see that. It's interesting. I had a conversation just in Salador today with a customer who's been coming in for only 36 years now. So he's one of our more recent.
Just arrived.
Yeah. And he was saying that he remembers 15 years ago talking about petroleum, kerosene associated characters. And he remembered me saying that I saw this as a fault in that probably before people generally perhaps accepted that opinion. That is that I don't want to, I mean, this doesn't mean it doesn't exist and that you haven't seen it, but I'm not looking at having a significant amount of that in our wines. Yeah. And so if there is a touch of it, I hope it just remains as a touch. It tends to suggest a degree of stress in the fruit, which honestly in 2019 is not out of the question. I mean, we would have had some vines that were struggling a bit, and it's a possibility that that would bring out a bit of that character. We do everything to avoid it, picking the fruit, you know, by hand, not skin contact, not using the pressings, not using what's in contact with the skins. But it can go through a bit of a stage, as long as it's not too prominent, is what I believe.
Yeah, it's definitely not, because having tasted so much of this over the last 6 months or so, it's the first time I've ever seen it. So it just seemed to be quite evident. The other
I'd
thing
like to add that, sorry, can I add that it was quite pronounced at the opening, but now it's after 20 minutes, half an hour, it's almost more or less gone. Yeah.
I think the other thing, Jeff, that stands out really strongly looking at these side by side is, as you pointed out, the lemon citrus component out of 19 versus the green lime in 20. They just define each other so very, very clearly. It's quite exciting to see it that way.
I think so. And I guess my feeling, I mean, there's a risk of suggesting that this is a justification, if you like, of the wines. What I see with those wines is such an expression of the vintage. And if we've done it well, I've never had an issue with that. In fact, I love to see that. I think on the Springvale, it shows even more than on Polish Hill. So to me, you know, 2019 was really a dry year where the crops were down. And there's a touch of suggestion, I think, that the wine will age really well because it will fill out. And then we got to 20 and it was even drier and even more concentrated. And so what we found is the concentration is there early, and a lot of people like that character. And I believe that it hasn't compromised the medium or long-term potential of the wine. However, when you see those two wines together, I would expect you'd be able to see, you'd be able to taste, experience the vintage. The vintages are absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. What's so cool with the 19 at this stage is how it's very obviously broadened and flattened out in the mid palate, and there's this kind of silky textural component that just is becoming more and more obvious. It's become really luscious now, which is quite exciting to see.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Springvale. In historically, so many people, I think I stopped saying it, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, that that Springvale had a lesser aging potential than Polish Hill. I think that both are 5 or 6 to 15 to 20 year propositions. Yeah. And I've noticed that as much as I didn't want it necessarily, Springvale almost demands it in certain years. Like 19 said on release, it said to me, "This looks lovely, but wait 6 months and it'll probably look better." The benefit this year is probably more obvious lime. So I'm feeling more comfortable straight up because it's just a little bit more expressive.
Yeah, I noticed that Mike Benny was talking about a waxy component in the 20, which I'm not finding tonight. I'm not sure if anyone else is seeing that. I was interested because that's something that's relatively atypical. It's not a trace that I look for in Riesling as a rule. I was quite intrigued by that note he made. He also made the comment about how the Springvale 20 is so gorgeous right now. He seemed particularly excited. Just talking about, I think the phrase he used was sweating on his lower brow, which I think is I'm sure a great sign of how much he was enjoying the tasting. Guys, maybe if you want to grab your Polish Hills now, and we can have a taste of those with Jeff.
Excuse me. That's there's some lovely comments there. So
I love reading
this.
The great thing about that Leasingham is it's a really inexpensive wine to buy. If I remember my time back in Australia, it wasn't an expensive grab.
It's actually looking pretty smart, and it's got a degree of phenolics, but it's carrying it very well. I'm very happy to be sipping it away on a Saturday night. I think, and I highlighted the fact that we had a decision with a colleague of mine who's here saying, we love drinking Australian wine. We know that it's our obligation, if you like, and sure, it's not a hard thing to drink all these wines from around the world. This is something that we, obviously professionally we need to do.
Got to do, yeah.
And I think in another room they've moved on to a Rhone, which is absolutely fine. But what I find out of that is this extraordinary reinforcement of the fact that the only reason the 2010 Trimbark, Frederick Emile was a failure, because I've had that wine 3 times in the last year, is the cork. And so people continue to support this flawed technology. And we won't claim that wine back. And most people will just pour the wine down the drain, or they'll be disappointed. So it's just a reality that I think most of your people would accept, but I get a reinforcement all the time.
I remember reading some trivia a while ago about there was an audit done of the Tyrrell's wines. This would be about 20 years back, and they have a fair library of it. And they came up with a number that 9.6% of all their wine was cork tainted with, in a 5 to 10 year spread. But what was really disturbing about that was less than 4% ever came back to the winery. So people are either drinking or it just messes up your brand. I just think it's such a tricky thing. But I agree. The Europeans, I don't think are going to embrace it anytime soon. That's for sure.
Must be a lot of disappointment that's not recorded. Anyway, yes.
So let's have a look. It's interesting because the 19 and 20s in terms of the color and the evolution of the two vintages are the same as Springvale onto Polish. There's definitely this golden broadening in color between the two.
Yeah.
And your thoughts in terms of the phenolics of the two as side by side? What do you think, Jeff?
To be perfectly honest, my concern and my belief when I started crushing the 2020 was that the bunches, I have to put this glass down. I mean, the bunches, if you like, in my hand were like this big, and normally they would be more like your hand. And I thought, wow, and I tasted them and I thought they seemed quite intense and they were yellow in color. And I thought, this is like an exaggeration of what we face with Polish Hill every year. I mean, they're yellow, berries and bunches, smaller than, Springvale, smaller than typical in the region. So my concern, my belief was, wow, this could be wonderful wine. My concern was that it would be out of style and that it could be more, there could be more extract because there are more skins. So the way we processed it was, very quickly to get it away from the skins and obviously not using pressings as has been the case for a long time. And then we tasted the wines, and I think that they have a weight. They have a weight about them, and a concentrated character. But then you see the palate, which to me is just so classically Polish Hill, a backbone, a consistency, a length, persistence of palate, and to be, again, trying to be honest to you, Frank. I was relieved because I thought the last thing we don't really need substantially more power in Polish Hill. What we need is we need classic style. And so I think of the wines we've made this year, this is the most consistent. In the 40 years we've made it, it's always had this backbone and persistence. And I thought this year breaking away from that, but in seeing the wine now, I'm actually dead happy with it.
I think the thing that really strikes me, it's the first time I've tasted it, is in the back palate. I'm getting so much grapefruit. It's got that crazy nervy acid, but in that sort of grapefruit palate, and I think it's delicious. It's really, really great. And again, I think a massive long-term seller, just judging by the acid.
I'm absolutely comfortable with the suggestion that it's 15 to 20 years. I think there's been a bit written. There haven't been many reviews now. Erin Larkin was one who came in early and wrote some amazing stuff. But she was in a very positive frame of mind about it. But I was aware that I think there's a risk that reviewers will look at this from the point of view of the way 2020 has been seen more generally, which is just be careful because the wine might look lovely now, but you know, and if you look past that and I think make your own assessment, my feeling is that I'm comfortable to say this wine is absolutely on point. And if you want to do 15 to 20 years, go right ahead. The only thing a question to be is why, might, it looks pretty good.
It's great now. It really is amazing. It's so cool to look at the 19 Polish. I think I'm really happy that we've got a few cases of the 19 still left. And as I was rummaging around packing, getting ready for the tasting tonight, I saw some 17, which I was really excited about. I hope it hasn't been sold and just not transferred to a client yet. So I'll need to chase that down. And if not, we'll be tasting that soon.
If you have it, look, I think it's drinking really well. So that'll be a lovely alternative to the others. If someone wants to, have a little mini vertical there. That should work.
I'll chase down the owners and see if they can join in a tasting. It'd be awesome. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Are there any questions from anybody before we let him go back to his dinner?
Oh no, it's great to talk to you guys. And last time, it was very interesting. I'm just having a look to see who else is there. I see Greg's there. It's all fine. Yeah. And no, if there's any question, please sing out. But I think, there's always a risk as a winemaker to say that the last vintage is, absolutely wonderful. Of course.
Yeah.
I think we could be excused for not being entirely objective in what we do, but I really believe that these wines are just lovely this year, and we've got a bit more concentration, and we work the season correctly. Keeping in mind the production is down under 50% of normal, so don't, if you like to speak to my accountant. I'm happy, but I just get a very clear message on what our income is for this year. Don't even want to go there. Unbelievable. You think I just have to keep smiling and going, I've got all my staff, we'll get through, we've got enough wine to get through, and the wine looks lovely. And a whole lot of people in the world are just putting up with absolute shit at the moment. So we think we're very happy with where we are. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Jeff. We're going to line up the rest of your wines in October to have a taste. I just wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive on these two tonight. Yeah. And so looking forward to catching up with you again in a few weeks. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, and thanks for coming.
And you too, and everyone listening, thanks a lot. It's great to see you again.
Nice. See you, Jeff.
Cheers. Bye.
Yo, so much grapefruit on the 20. It's on the Polish 20. It's insane. It just like grabs the whole palate, just totally dominates it. The point he made about 20 being so hard in Australia versus Grosset have, prevailing is quite interesting, because so often the market will say, no, it's a terrible year, and forget about the vintage and write the whole production off without looking at the jewels. And I think that this is an example. I remember 20 years ago, 1997 was written off by everybody as a complete disaster in South Australia, mainly because it was stuck between 96 and 98 that was so good. And now, if you go back and find those wines, they are probably traveling better than 96 and 98. They're just absolutely classic and stoic, and really inexpensive relative to their neighbors, which is an interesting one. So guys, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I'll do a recording of this and whack it up online. And in terms of available volumes of the 20s, we probably have just a few dozen left of the Springvale. That's the one that's particularly hammered in allocation. And then the Polish we've got a little bit more of. So I'll be sending an offer out next week, and with links to the Rieslings as well. So thanks for coming, and enjoy your weekend. Cheers, guys.
All good, Robert.
Cheers, Dave. Welcome back to Singapore.
Thanks very much. Out of quarantine.
Where did you stay during quarantine?
I was struggling at the Shangri-La on Orange Grove.